Hello everyone, this is Stefan Persson, also known as Invencia, and welcome to my Ludum Dare 41 Postmortem, which is a narrated version of my time-lapse that I released a couple of weeks ago, just shortly after the event. So the theme this time around was combined two incompatible game genres, and I ended up making golf and grenades, which is a combination of golf and maybe a survival type of game where you have to dodge zombies. This time around I had my game pretty much sorted out in my head before the event. I had a hunch that this would be the winning theme, and the day before while I was driving I thought of maybe I should just combine golf and an avoidance game. So I jumped pretty much straight into modeling from the get-go. So I booted up Blender and I started to model a low poly character. This isn't the first time that I made a low poly platformer style game. So I jumped straight in, and it's been about 6 months since I did it last time, and I haven't really practiced any of it since, but it came back fairly straightforward, or fairly fast for me. So I went straight into modeling. I wanted the low poly look, and I jumped straight into rigging. I did have to look at some of the online or YouTube tutorials for it, especially for the inverse kinematic of the leg movements. And a couple of hours into the event, my son threw up. He had a stomach bug. The whole family had a stomach bug, and he was the last one to get it. So I ended up sitting with him for about an hour while he was throwing up, and trying to get him to calm down and relax and get back to sleep, which he eventually did after about an hour. So that was nice that for him obviously, because it sucks being ill, but he got back asleep then. So 3 hours into the event, I continued, and I weight painted the character, and it's fairly straightforward on a low poly mesh to get the movement, and I always just make sure it's good enough. I try not to waste too much time, because you could spend forever doing the weight painting, but just to get it to be good enough, which is always nice with the Ludum Dare events. It forces you to just let go and push on with the game. And then I moved on to modeling some of the props, the grenade and his cap and the golf bag and the flag and the golf club, and then some trees that were going to go on the level itself. I make enough trees to have some variation on the level, and again, I don't spend too much time making them. In the past I've made the trees animated by rigging them with bones and having them blow in the wind, but I found that to be taking too much time for what it's worth. The effect is so subtle that it's not worth putting hours into that. So I skipped that this time around. Following this, I wanted to get the animation going for the characters, so I went into modeling the golf swing, which I've never done before. So I looked at some reference pictures just to get the general. It's probably a terrible golf swing, but it's good enough for the game, and I wanted to have a bit of a cartoony or exaggerated movement to it as well, and also wanted to look a bit funny or arcadey and cute. So pretty straightforward. I don't really do any inverse kinematics or anything for the arms. I do it by bone rotation instead, and I just try to get it to be good enough, really. The hands don't really stay 100% where the club is, but I think it's good enough. And I also parented the club to the right hand bone, so it follows with the swing. So that's what controls what the direction of the club is going to be. And then I moved into doing the movements, the running and walking as well. I've done that a few times now as well, so I look at some reference images online and just get the general 4 key frames of transitioning and contact and those key movements of the walk phase, and I get those right, and then I mirror those for the other side as well. So we're now about 7 hours into the event. Everyone is awake in the house, and the kids are running around, and I felt quite happy at this point, and I had the main character and some of the visuals in place, so I took a break at that time and went outside with the kids. The sun was shining, and the spring has finally come, so we went outside for a bit and did some The kids were doing some scootering and skateboarding, and then we spent some time on the swings together. Had a good time outside, and I think we were out for about maybe an hour and a half or something like that, and they convinced me to put my own rollerblades on. I'm terrible at rollerblading, but it was fun to do that with them. It's quite flat outside, and with the helmet I feel all right enough to be to be on them. So approaching midday here, about noon, I managed to get back into the gist of things, and I moved on to, or I decided to do the zombies straight away. In the past I would have probably continued with implementing the game, but I figured that I had the momentum going with the Blender modeling and the rigging and everything like that, so I wanted to capitalize on that by just continuing and finishing up all the work in Blender. So I modeled the zombie, and I did his limbs separate, as separate meshes, so I could blow them off with a grenade. And then I tend to work with the same material for all my objects, and then I have a palette going as a diffuse image, and then I just use UV mapping to pick the colors. I like the flat shaded look of the game that I make, and I just that way I can really control what palettes is using, and it also is good for performance since all the objects really are using the same material, which reduces the draw calls. It's so low poly anyway, it doesn't really matter, but it's nice to have it nice and fast performing. So the zombies, they got 4 different walk cycles, and basically they're just modifications of the first walk cycle, and I use the same reference images more or less that I do for the other objects as well. And then the zombies only have one more animation, and that's when they attack, which is just they start throwing themselves, and then they transition into a ragdoll when they start to launch themselves at you, and then that's all the animations that I needed to do for the zombies. I modeled a primitive golf course, and I was going to make those modular later on, but I wanted to have a golf course to run around on because I added the nav mesh and the AI agents. The animator blend trees are quite simple as well. It's for the main character, it's a blend tree between a walk and a run cycle, and then the swing. And then for the zombies, it's a combination of a blend tree as well, with 4 different walk cycles and a parameter that controls, just randomly allocates one of the walk cycles to a zombie, and whatever walk cycle that zombie gets, he keeps walking on that cycle. He doesn't ever change it. And now we're about 12 or 13 hours into the event. So the event starts at 3 a.m. in Sweden, so I set my alarm just before that. And so now it's in the afternoon, and I was feeling quite confident with the progress so far, and because I knew I already had the player and the trees and the animations that I needed, and for the zombies as well, and I still had 34 hours remaining, so I knew I could get the game to a point where it'll be playable to some state, and from now on it was just a matter of how much am I going to be able to put in. And I really wanted to add a lot of content this time, and I've failed on a number of levels before, so I wanted to make sure that I got enough time to implement at least 9 holes or 9 levels in this game. We also played up a bit of a game called Bigfoot, which my son likes a lot, so we multiplayed that for maybe half an hour, and where you have to run around in the woods. And I don't really like horror games, yet I'm making a zombie game. I don't really like zombies either, but for this game I wanted to implement them anyway. I thought that'd be fun. And here I'm making the ragdoll. I had some problems with making the ragdoll. It picks up the bones a little bit incorrectly, and the sizes of the colliders were all wrong, so I had to make do with just adjusting the colliders myself a little bit. I'm not sure why that was happening. But I didn't want to get stuck solving the problem there and then, so I just modified the colliders to be good enough. And then I'm using the nav mesh and the AI agents that comes with Unity to get the navigation going. And originally I had the player himself doing the nav mesh as well, so whenever he'd shoot or strike the ball, wherever it landed, he would run to it. But I changed that later on so you could navigate yourself, because otherwise he would just run onto the zombies. So by changing it so I could control the player with the arrow keys, or back and forth and left and right. I think it works with the controller as well. Then that was a lot more fun to be able to dodge or trick the zombies to where you were running. So I ditched the nav mesh for the player, and I just kept the AI agents on the zombies themselves, and they will just retarget towards you as you run around. They'll just constantly keep targeting you, and then the AI will re-navigate and plot the path to try to catch you. And then I randomize some of the parameters, like the run cycles that they get, and also the speed that they run at or walk at. Now 18 hours in, and it's 9 p.m. in the evening, so the kids have gone to bed pretty much at this time. And then I managed to implement the grenade explosions, and I did a simple particle system for that. So at this point, let's see, yeah, you could strike the ball, and you could also strike the grenades and have them explode and kill the zombies. So I was really happy with the progress so far. I pretty much had the core mechanics of the game here. So from this point, it's all a matter of how can I tie this together to be a game. And I've learned in the past as well that the game states and transitioning to and from the menu and spawning your objects and things like that should not be underestimated. It always takes a lot of time to get the game state machine going, and transitioning in and out of menus, having a level reset. And in the past I've gone a lot for spawning levels as prefabs, and I haven't really used the scene management at all in Unity, which is quite surprising because that's the main thing you really do, levels. But I've always, for some reason, preferred working in one scene and then having prefabs spawn with the levels. But this time around I didn't do it that way because I ran into problems with the prefabs spawning and the nav meshes. So then I went into the approach of creating separate scenes in Unity and having the proper scene manager load these scenes and keeping them some of the elements persistent. And that's how I'm going to be doing it from now on, because it is a more robust way, and it makes managing your objects a lot easier, because when you load a scene you could just have it destroy previous objects and reset all the objects to what that scene looks like. So I had a lot of fun just having the zombies throw themselves at you. And they would just end up piling up into piles. So at 1 a.m. I'd been going for about 22 hours. Before I went to bed I wanted to model the final bits in Blender, so I did some pretty much nearly like floating islands, but more of golf course components. About 10 to 15 different objects, and that would be the little islands. And then I added some more greens, bunkers and stones and rock, and then I exported those and imported those into Unity. There's also Unity and Blender works in different coordinate systems, where Unity uses Z-axis as forward and in Blender it's the Y-axis. So I have a script that I use to apply to get the rotations correct so they work in Unity. Also the scale is a bit off, so that takes a bit of fixing with as well. So I mocked up a level and had pretty much one level completed then before I went to bed. So let's see, it was pretty much 24 hours that I put into the first day. So I crashed into bed and fell asleep. Didn't have too long of a sleep. I think it was maybe 5 hours or something like that. But I did feel rested enough to get cracking again. So I started about 8:30 in the morning. So that would make, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, yeah, 5.5 hours of sleep. So I went into making the menu now. I wanted to, since I had a playable level, I wanted to get the menu and the game transition and the I always like to have a aesthetically pleasing menu with all the buttons and everything working, rather than just having you thrown into a game. So I started to put some hours into getting the main menu going, and I also like to have how to play instructions, because I know for Ludum Dare people don't really want to spend too much time figuring out how it works. So a simple screen to just say how you play, I learned from the first one that's extremely valuable. And then I could also spend some time now adding different statistics, so you could see how many strikes you'd made, how far the ball had traveled, how long you had covered by running, and also how many zombies you had killed. And I thought that would be quite fun to add some statistics. I didn't go for a leaderboard as such this time, or a high score system, which I have done in the past. This time I just implemented the statistics rather, to so you could see and keep track of it yourself. 11 a.m. now, and 15 hours or 16 hours remain. The main menu is starting to get into a fairly good shape. And it's a fair amount of coding at this point. And then I realized that you need to be able to see the ball at all times. So I implemented some particle systems to highlight where the ball was, because otherwise you tended to just shoot that away and it'll disappear into nowhere. So by adding a particle system to beam a light where the ball is, really helped for you to locate where the ball was when once you had, especially since you you struck the ball and it landed somewhere, and then maybe you dodged a few zombies. It needed to be a point where you could actually locate the ball, so that was a particle system solved that problem. Then I implemented a day and night cycle as well, and that's just a simple rotation of the light. So it over time it rotates the light source around one of the axes, and it doesn't really have any impact on the game itself, other than adding to the atmosphere of having it turn into night and day. At 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and things were looking quite good. I had all the features that I wanted to implemented in the game, so I could start making the different levels now. And that's just a matter of dragging prefabs into a scene and placing them, and then recalculating or rebuilding the nav mesh. I did run into a problem where it was replacing the nav mesh, which scared me a bit. I thought maybe I can't get this to work with different nav meshes, but it turned out that when I cloned objects and recalculated the nav mesh, I just had to basically reload the scenes and refresh everything, and it kept the nav mesh properly then. So I continued just modeling the different, or just dragging and dropping objects into different scenes to make the 9 holes that I was going to make. And 12 hours remain. Went outside again a little bit and played with the kids, and we put the bouncy mat up. It's been in winter storage, so we mounted that and had them jumping up a little and down on it. So I got a little bit of fresh air then. "12 hours remain, a little bit more, so back into level creation. And if you like the soundtrack of this, you can download it from the URL that you see on the screen as well. You can also listen to the soundtrack of this time-lapse in the full time-lapse video, which isn't narrated. When you drag and drop objects in or prefabs in Unity, if you drag them into the scene you can actually, they place really well. So since I had the origin of the objects or the pivot points at the base of the trees, it was really simple to just drag trees into the scene onto the poly meshes of the level, and the trees are already grounded on the floor. So it's a really fast way to do it. So make sure if you're going to do it, if you do trees, to mold them that way, so that the origin of the pivot points is at the base. It makes it really easy to add them. So I'm on the second to last level now. I just had tried to keep some different characteristics of the different levels, and on the last one I have a bit of a tunnel where all the zombies come through. So all the zombies spawn by the green and come and attack you through that tunnel. So that's sort of the final level. I implemented some difficulty levels, and then when 9 hours remain, I started to make the soundtrack, and that's 3 hours earlier than I have been making music in the past. So I was really happy that I could start making the music earlier than usual. And also the track itself, I was happy with pretty much from the get-go. I wanted an old style SID or chip style music, and I got that vibe going pretty much the way I wanted it straight away. So that was really nice. The cups of coffee are starting to pile up, and but the music was really coming along nicely, and I was happy about that. I find that making music is one of the most difficult things during Ludum Dare, because you never know what the inspiration is going to give you, and sometimes it just doesn't work for me to make music. I don't get anywhere, and it's a struggle then. But at other times it flows quite well, and this time around, luckily enough, I got into the vibe of making the music, and it just sort of flowed from there on. And before I knew it, I had a 3.5 minute track that I was happy with. So I exported that and imported it into the game. And I didn't make a separate music for the menu in the game. I just kept the same track playing, which I think worked in this game as well. And then I implemented just a feature where you could, first I had it so you can enable and disable the music with a tick box. But I changed that to a slider instead, so you can control the volume if you wanted to just lower it, and that just works with the player pref to save whatever setting it is into memory. I ran into a bug with Unity that really scared me, and that's when I was implementing this. Then it really flipped out on me and started to throw up really weird messages in the console, and I was a bit afraid that I had corrupted the whole project. But it turned out that, I don't know what it was, but I re-implemented just the player pref and the loading and the saving of the volume and how that worked, and the event management for pulling the slider. And I restarted Unity, and I think, yeah, just Unity itself, and then that error had gone away, luckily enough. So I made a backup of the project as well, because it freaked me out a little bit. 5 hours remain, and the game is pretty much finished at this point. I needed to make sound effects as well, so during this, it's not really a coffee break as the thing shows, I went out and recorded some of the sound effects in the garage. I have my sound recording room there, so I had my little portable recorder, and I just recorded some impact sounds and some zombie growls and things like that. And then I copied those into edit them in SoundForge, and I had a fair amount of variations of the different sounds of striking the ball, and whooshes for the golf swing, and also the zombie growls and things like that. So I quickly went through to just make different variations, because I didn't really know which of the sounds would work best, so I thought I'd just edit loads of them and have them imported, and then pick whatever ones would work. I always add the sounds the last thing I do in a game when everything else is solid, because then I can just spend as much time as I feel I have to add the sounds. Even though I love sounds and audio in games, I do not prioritize it as much as having the whole game playable and solid and with as few bugs as possible. So as long as there's some sounds, I'm happy with that. And then I made the title art, and I misspelt it. I spelt grenades with an A instead of an E, which I didn't realize at that time, but I did make the title art. and I made that in Illustrator, and then I converted it into bitmap and imported it. 2 hours remain, and I was happy with the game and about to submit it to Ludum Dare. I did some play testing just to make sure I could transition through the different levels and play the different holes, and that there wasn't any major glitches. And then I started to build this is that 1 hour and a half remained. I started to make the first builds to make sure it compiled and also get the WebGL version going. And I was fairly confident all along that the WebGL would work because I didn't use any fancy effects or anything like that. And I had my own custom font in it, which could be another thing to throw you off if you use the default font, but everything was working. So I compiled it and started to submit it, and that's when I realized that I had misspelt grenades, so I had to redo the title art. It's the spell checker when I was writing the description that gave me the hint that it was misspelt. So when 30 minutes remained, I was finished and I uploaded the game, and everything worked as I had hoped pretty much. And I was happy with that. The thing I didn't feel too confident with, and that's what's been given the most criticism, is the way you line up for a shot. Because when you run up to a ball, you swing in the side, like from side. So you watch the guy from behind and he swings and he shoots the ball 90-degree angle, so you don't really see where you fire. I did implement where you can actually rotate when you've held the swing down like this. You can actually rotate to aim, but you can only do that if you're swinging at maximum power. And but I also feel like I didn't really have much more time to perfect it or change it without risking breaking something, so I decided to keep it this way. And for a post Ludum Dare event version of the game, I'm going to change this to a more traditional golf swing. So as you approach a ball, you can tap the action button and he'll go into swing mode where you get a traditional aim and a swing meter instead. So I'll change that later on. But I was happy enough with it anyway. It added a little bit to the gameplay to make it tricky to maybe run around. But if I could have changed one thing maybe before the launch, that would have been the one I would have preferred to change if possible. Thanks a lot for watching. This has been my Ludum Dare 41 narrated version of the time-lapse and the postmortem. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this, and I'm looking forward to whatever next games we make. And have a good day, and thanks again for watching.